Story 1. The Mirror Truck. Christopher Walsh had been hauling freight across America for 26 years when he first saw his own truck following him on Interstate 40 in New Mexico. It was February of 2023 and he was driving his Kenworth T680 from Albuquerque to Flagstaff with a load of electronics. The night was clear, stars visible in the desert sky, and traffic was light as usual for 3 in the morning. Christopher noticed the headlights in his mirror around mile marker 117. 2 bright spots maintaining a steady distance behind him, neither gaining nor falling back. This was normal enough. Truckers often matched speeds on long stretches of highway, settling into a comfortable pace. But something about these particular headlights bothered Christopher in a way he could not immediately identify. He adjusted his mirror for a better view. The truck behind him was a Kenworth T680, same model as his own. Even in the darkness, Christopher could make out the distinctive shape, the curve of the hood, the placement of the lights. Coincidence, he told himself. T680s were popular models, thousands of them on the road. But as the miles passed and the following truck maintained its exact distance, Christopher began noticing other similarities. The truck behind him had the same color scheme, the same company logo on the door, even the same configuration of running lights along the trailer. It was not just similar to his truck, it appeared to be identical. Christopher picked up his CB radio. "This is Night Rider to the Kenworth behind me at mile 120. You running for Midwest Transport too?" Static answered. Christopher tried again, cycling through channels. Nothing but white noise. His phone showed full signal, which was unusual for this stretch of New Mexico, but when he tried to call dispatch, the call would not connect. It rang endlessly without going through. He returned his attention to the mirror. The truck was still there, still maintaining that exact distance, as if connected to Christopher's own rig by an invisible tether. When Christopher sped up to 70, the following truck sped up. When he slowed to 60, it slowed precisely. The distance between them never varied by more than a few feet. Christopher decided to test something. He activated his turn signal to change lanes. In his mirror, he saw the following truck's turn signal activate at the exact same moment. Both trucks moved to the left lane in perfect synchronization. Both moved back to the right lane together. They were not just driving the same route. They were driving in perfect unison. Fear began to creep into Christopher's chest, cold and insistent. He had heard stories from other truckers about strange things on the road, about ghost trucks and phantom vehicles. But Christopher was a practical man, not given to superstition. There had to be a rational explanation. Someone was playing a prank, using his CB radio silence to mess with him, following deliberately close to freak him out. Christopher jerked his wheel to the right, pulling onto the shoulder suddenly. His truck skidded slightly on the gravel before coming to a stop. He looked in his mirror, expecting the following truck to pass by, to reveal itself as something ordinary. Instead, the mirror truck pulled onto the shoulder at the exact same moment, in the exact same manner, stopping at the exact same distance behind Christopher's rig. Perfect synchronization. Impossible synchronization. Christopher climbed down from his cab, his boots crunching on gravel. The desert air was cold, his breath visible in the glow of his trailer lights. He walked toward the other truck, his hand instinctively reaching for the tire iron he kept behind his seat. As he got closer, more details became visible in the ambient light. The truck was identical. Same model, same year, same paint job, same company logo, same license plate. Christopher stopped walking. Same license plate. His license plate. The truck behind him had his exact license plate number. He approached the driver's side door of the mirror truck. The cab was dark, no interior lights, no movement visible through the windows. Christopher reached up and tried the door handle. Locked. He cupped his hands against the window and peered inside. The cab was empty. No driver, no personal items, no logbooks or coffee cups or any of the debris that accumulates in a working truck. Just an empty cab with the engine running, idling smoothly, waiting. Christopher backed away from the mirror truck and returned to his own rig. He climbed in, started the engine, and pulled back onto the highway. In his mirror, he watched the empty truck pull back onto the highway at the exact same moment, maintaining its precise distance. He drove faster, pushing his speed to 80. The mirror truck matched him perfectly. He tried to slow down gradually, hoping to pass an exit where he could make a sudden turn, but every time he positioned himself to exit, the mirror truck positioned itself identically, making escape impossible. The sun began to rise, dawn spreading across the New Mexico desert. Christopher hoped that daylight would break whatever spell or phenomenon had trapped him with his doppelganger truck. But the sunrise only made things worse. In the growing light, Christopher could see the mirror truck more clearly, and what he saw made his hands shake on the wheel. The truck was aging. As Christopher watched in his mirror, the paint began to fade. Chrome started to tarnish. The tires showed wear. It was as if decades were passing for the mirror truck in the span of minutes, time accelerating for it while Christopher's own truck remained unchanged. But it was not just aging, it was deteriorating. Rust appeared on the panels, the windshield cracked. The trailer began to list slightly to one side. The mirror truck was decaying, falling apart, while still maintaining its perfect distance and synchronization with Christopher's movements. Christopher grabbed his CB radio again, desperate now. "This is Knight Rider to anyone on Interstate 40 westbound. I need help. Someone please respond." This time a voice answered, but it was not another trucker. It was Christopher's own voice, distorted and echoing, speaking his words back to him a fraction of a second delayed. "This is Knight Rider to anyone on Interstate 40 westbound. I need help. Someone please respond." "Who is this?" Christopher demanded. His own voice answered, "Who is this?" Every word Christopher spoke was repeated back to him in his own voice, the delay creating a disorienting echo effect that made conversation impossible. He threw down the CB radio handset in frustration and focused on driving. The mirror truck continued to decay. Pieces began to fall off. A hubcap spun away into the desert. Part of the trailer's side panel detached and tumbled across the highway. But the truck kept driving, kept following, kept matching Christopher's every movement despite falling apart around its unseen driver. Christopher passed Gallup, then the Arizona border. He should have been in Flagstaff by now, but the GPS showed him still hours away, as if the highway was stretching, adding miles faster than he could drive them. The distance to his destination never decreased no matter how long he drove. By mid-morning, the mirror truck was barely recognizable. It looked like it had been driving for 50 years without maintenance. The cab was held together with rust. The trailer was more gap than metal. Tires were shredded down to rims. But it kept driving, an impossible wreck that physics said should not be moving, should not be operational, should not exist. And then Christopher understood. The mirror truck was not following him. It was showing him what his truck would become, what he would become if he stayed on the road. It was a glimpse into a future where Christopher never stopped driving, never retired, never left the highway. A future where he and his truck merged into a single entity, growing old together, decaying together, becoming a ghost rig that haunted Interstate 40 forever. The mirror truck was his future, and it was following him because he was driving toward it, getting closer with every mile. Christopher pulled off at the next exit, a small town in Arizona whose name he did not catch. He parked his truck in a gas station lot, climbed down, and walked away. He left his keys in the ignition, left his logbooks on the seat, left his entire life as a trucker behind. He called his wife, told her he was done, told her he was coming home. He bought a bus ticket and rode back to Albuquerque, watching through the window as the highway passed by. Watching for any sign of his truck. Watching for the mirror truck that had shown him his fate. 3 days later, Christopher's dispatcher called. They had found his truck abandoned in Arizona. No damage, no signs of why he had left it. They wanted to know what happened. Christopher could not explain. Could not make them understand that he had seen his future in his mirror, had seen what happens to truckers who never stop, who drive until they and their trucks become one, who haunt the highways as cautionary tales for other drivers. Christopher never drove a truck again. He took a job at a warehouse, something stationary, something that kept him off the road. But sometimes at night he dreams about Interstate 40. Dreams about his Kenworth T680 still parked in that Arizona gas station waiting for him. Dreams about the mirror truck still following, still aging, still showing him the future he escaped. And sometimes when he is driving his personal car on the highway, he sees it in his rearview mirror. A Kenworth T680, ancient and decrepit, barely holding together, following at a precise distance. It appears for just a moment, long enough for Christopher to recognize it, long enough for him to remember what he escaped, long enough to remind him that the mirror truck is still out there, still following the future version of himself that continues to drive. The version that never stopped. The version that merged with his truck and became a permanent fixture on Interstate 40. Christopher always changes lanes when he sees it, always takes the next exit, always does whatever he can to break the connection. And the mirror truck disappears, fading back into the space between mirrors and reality, waiting for the next time Christopher gets too comfortable on the highway, waiting to show him once again the fate he narrowly avoided. But Christopher knows the truth. You can never fully escape your mirror. You can only delay the moment when you meet it, when you become it, when the reflection and the real merge into a single entity driving forever on highways that stretch toward horizons that never get closer. The mirror truck is still out there, still following someone, still showing truckers their futures, still maintaining that perfect distance between what is and what will be if you never stop driving, never stop chasing the white lines, never stop believing that the next delivery will be your last. When in truth, for some truckers, there is no last delivery, only the endless road and the mirror truck following behind, showing you exactly where that road leads and what you become when you reach the end of it. Story 2. The Passenger Log. Elizabeth Norton had driven for transcontinental freight for 18 years before she noticed the extra signature in her logbook. She was parked at a rest area in Pennsylvania, updating her hours of service for the day when she saw it. A name written in handwriting that was not hers, signed in the passenger column for the previous day's entry. The name was Michael Strauss, and next to it was a timestamp and a note stating passenger and sleeper berth. Elizabeth had not carried any passenger. She drove alone, always had, company policy for her route. She stared at the signature, trying to understand how it had gotten there. The logbook had been with her the entire time, locked in her Freightliner Cascadia's cab when she was away from the truck. Elizabeth checked the date. Yesterday she had driven from Pittsburgh to Harrisburg. 8 hours on the road, no stops except for fuel and a quick meal. Definitely no passenger. She considered that someone might have accessed her truck while she slept, might have played a prank. But the rest area where she had parked was secure, well lit, with her cab doors locked from inside. She grabbed her phone and searched for Michael Strauss. The search returned dozens of results, but one caught her attention. Michael Strauss, a trucker who had disappeared in 2011 while driving a route through Pennsylvania. Disappeared without a trace, his truck found abandoned at a rest area. No signs of foul play, no indication of where he had gone. Elizabeth told herself it was coincidence. Common name, Probably dozens of Michael Strasses in the trucking industry. But something about the signature bothered her, made the back of her neck prickle with unease. She closed the logbook and tried to focus on her route for the next day. That night, Elizabeth woke to sounds from her sleeper berth, movement subtle but distinct, like someone shifting position on the mattress beside her. She froze, her heart hammering. The sleeper berth was small, barely enough room for one person. If someone was in there with her, she would know it. She would feel their presence, but she felt nothing. The berth was empty except for herself. Elizabeth turned on the dome light. Empty. She checked the cab. Empty. No one was in her truck except her. Yet she could have sworn she heard someone breathing soft and regular coming from the sleeper berth. She did not sleep the rest of that night. She sat in her driver's seat, doors locked, watching the rest area through her windshield, waiting for dawn. The next morning, Elizabeth opened her logbook to record her pre-trip inspection. Another signature appeared. Michael Strass, written in the same handwriting, noting him as a passenger in the sleeper berth for the entire previous night. The exact hours Elizabeth had been trying to sleep. Elizabeth drove to her delivery in Philadelphia, her hands tight on the wheel, her eyes constantly checking her mirrors, half expecting to see someone in the sleeper berth behind her. The GPS guided her through the city to a warehouse district. She backed into a loading dock and waited for the warehouse crew to unload her trailer. While she waited, Elizabeth went through her logbook page by page. More signatures appeared, all Michael Strass, all marking him as a passenger going back weeks. But Elizabeth only noticed them now. The signatures had been there all along, written in spaces she had not paid attention to, filling in passenger columns she had always left blank, documenting a presence that should not exist. The warehouse crew finished unloading. Elizabeth signed the paperwork and prepared to leave. That was when she saw him. A man stood at the edge of the loading dock watching her truck. He was in his 40s, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, typical trucker attire. But something about him was wrong. He was translucent, not solid, like an image projected onto the air. Elizabeth could see through him to the warehouse wall behind. The man raised his hand in a wave. Elizabeth recognized him from the photos she had found online. Michael Strass, the disappeared trucker, the phantom passenger who had been signing her logbook. Elizabeth did not wave back. She climbed into her truck, started the engine, and pulled away from the warehouse. In her mirror, she saw Michael Strass standing on the loading dock watching her go, his translucent form fading as distance increased. But he was in her truck now. She knew it without looking, could feel a presence in the sleeper berth, could sense someone sitting behind her, watching over her shoulder as she drove. The temperature in the cab dropped 10 degrees. Her breath became visible. Ice crystals formed on the inside of her windshield despite the heater running at full blast. "Why are you here?" Elizabeth asked, speaking to the empty cab, speaking to the presence she could not see but knew was there. The CB radio crackled to life, though Elizabeth had not turned it on. A voice came through, distorted and echoing. "I need a ride. I've been trying to get home for 12 years. No one stops, no one sees me, but you're different. You can feel me. You can help me." "I'm not a taxi service," Elizabeth said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm a freight hauler. I can't just drive you wherever you want to go." "You're already going where I need to go," the voice said. "You've been going there for weeks. I've been signing in, following proper procedure, documenting my presence in your logs. I'm a legal passenger. I'm following regulations." Elizabeth wanted to laugh at the absurdity. A ghost concerned with DOT regulations. But trucking was all about following rules, about documentation, about maintaining proper logs. Maybe that extended beyond death for some drivers. Maybe Michael Strass was still trying to drive legal, even as a phantom. "Where are you trying to get to?" Elizabeth asked. "Home," the voice said. "Erie, Pennsylvania. I was driving there when I stopped at that rest area. I was almost home, 50 miles away, but I never made it. Something happened. I don't remember what. And I've been trying to get there ever since, trying to find a driver who could feel me, who could give me a ride those last 50 miles. Elizabeth's next delivery was a pickup in Harrisburg, then a delivery to Buffalo. Erie was on the way, more or less. She could make a detour. It would cost her an hour, maybe two, but she could do it. "Fine," Elizabeth said. "I'll take you to Erie. But then you leave my truck. You sign out of my logbook and you never come back." "Deal?" "Deal," the voice said, and the temperature in the cab returned to normal. Elizabeth drove north, following her GPS toward Erie. Michael Strauss remained in the sleeper berth, silent now, present but not intrusive. Elizabeth could feel him there, a weight that was not physical, a presence that existed in the space between material and immaterial. As they approached Erie, the presence became stronger. Elizabeth heard sounds from the sleeper berth, sounds of someone moving, preparing to leave. The GPS showed 15 miles to the city limits. 10 miles. 5 miles. "Where exactly do you need to go?" Elizabeth asked. The voice on the CB radio gave her an address. Elizabeth plugged it into her GPS. A residential neighborhood on the east side of Erie, a quiet street with older homes. Elizabeth found the house and parked her truck on the street in front of it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Elizabeth felt the presence move, felt Michael Strauss pass through the cab, felt him pause at the passenger door. "Thank you," the voice said, quiet and grateful. The passenger door opened by itself, then closed. Elizabeth watched through her window as a translucent figure walked up the sidewalk to the house. Michael Strauss stood on the porch for a moment, looking at the home he had been trying to reach for 12 years. Then he faded, disappearing like morning mist, finally home, finally released from whatever had kept him trapped between rest areas and highways. Elizabeth checked her logbook. The last entry for Michael Strauss showed him signing out, noting his exit at the Erie address, complete with timestamp. Proper documentation, even to the very end. Elizabeth drove away, continuing her route to Buffalo. She tried to put the experience behind her, tried to forget about the phantom passenger. But 2 days later, while parked at a rest area in Ohio, she heard the sounds again. Movement in the sleeper berth, breathing that was not her own. She opened her logbook with a sense of dread. A new signature appeared in the passenger column, a different name this time. Sarah Chen, another trucker who had disappeared years ago, another ghost trying to get home. Elizabeth understood then. She had become a ferry service for lost truckers, for drivers who had died or disappeared on the road, who were trying to reach destinations they never completed. By helping Michael Strauss, she had opened herself to others, had marked herself as someone who could perceive them, who could give them the rides they desperately needed. And Elizabeth Norton, 18-year veteran of transcontinental freight, made a choice. She could refuse, could ignore the signatures in her logbook, could pretend not to feel the presences in her sleeper berth. Or she could help them, could give these lost drivers the one thing they needed, a ride home. She chose to help. Over the following months, Elizabeth's logbook filled with signatures, dozens of them. Names of truckers who had vanished, who had died on the road, who were trapped between where they died and where they needed to go. Elizabeth drove them all. She made detours, added miles to her routes, took extra time to visit addresses her phantom passengers provided. Her dispatcher noticed the inefficiencies, the extended delivery times, the unusual route deviations. They questioned her, threatened to let her go if her performance did not improve. Elizabeth could not explain, could not make them understand that she was providing a service no one else could provide, that she was helping drivers complete their final runs. Elizabeth still drives today, still signs in phantom passengers, still makes detours to addresses that her GPS marks as residential homes or truck stops or rest areas. Her logbook is full of names, some famous in trucking circles, disappearances that had been mysteries for years, now documented in her passenger log as she gives them rides to their final destinations. She has become known among the ghosts, Elizabeth Norton, the trucker who can see them, who can feel them, who will give them passage. They find her at rest areas, appear in her sleeper berth, sign themselves into her logbook using her pen while she sleeps, leaving signatures that mark them as passengers following proper regulations even in death. And Elizabeth accepts them all, because every trucker deserves to complete their run, deserves to reach their destination, deserves to go home. Even if that completion comes years or decades after they disappeared from the physical world, even if that destination can only be reached by riding in the sleeper berth of a Freightliner Cascadia driven by a woman who sees what others cannot, who feels what others ignore, who maintains the most unusual passenger log in the entire trucking industry. A log that documents not trips taken by the living, but final journeys completed by the dead. Story 3. The Black Ice Road. Gregory Mills was hauling frozen food from Minneapolis to Fargo when he encountered the black ice on Highway 94 in North Dakota. It was December of 2022 and the temperature had dropped to 15 below zero. Gregory had driven through worse. 21 years in a Volvo VNL had taught him to respect winter highways but not to fear them. The black ice appeared without warning. One moment the road was clear, dry pavement reflecting his headlights. The next moment his truck hit a patch of invisible ice and began to slide. Gregory's training took over. He eased off the accelerator, kept his wheels steady, did not touch the brakes. The truck slid sideways for 50 feet before the tires found purchase again on clear pavement. Gregory's heart pounded, but he maintained control. That had been close. Black ice was the most dangerous road condition, invisible until you were already on it, turning highways into skating rinks without warning. He slowed to 45, watching the road ahead carefully, looking for the telltale signs of more ice. The temperature gauge in his truck showed 20 below now. Dropping fast, wind picked up, pushing snow across the highway in horizontal streams. Visibility decreased. Gregory considered pulling over, waiting out the storm, but he was only 30 miles from Fargo. He could make it. Then he saw the other vehicles. They appeared suddenly in his headlights. A line of cars and trucks stopped dead in the middle of the highway. No warning signs, no flares, no emergency lights. Just a pileup of vehicles, at least a dozen of them blocking both lanes. Gregory hit his brakes, felt his truck begin to slide again. He was on another patch of black ice, a huge one covering the entire road surface. His truck slid toward the stopped vehicles, momentum carrying him forward despite his attempts to slow down. He was going to hit them. Nothing he could do would stop it, but he did not hit them. His truck slid past the first vehicle, a sedan passing within inches, then past a pickup truck, then past another semi. The stopped vehicles seemed to shift position somehow, moving just enough to let Gregory's sliding truck pass between them, creating a narrow corridor through the pileup that should not have existed. Gregory's truck finally stopped half a mile beyond the pileup, coming to rest on clear pavement. He sat there, hands shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. He should have crashed. The physics of the situation made collision inevitable, but he had slid through the pileup like a ghost passing through solid objects. He grabbed his CB radio. "This is North Star to any driver near mile marker 115 on 94. There's a massive pileup blocking both lanes. Someone needs to call Highway Patrol." Static answered. Gregory tried different channels. Nothing. He picked up his phone. No signal. The storm must be interfering with communications. Gregory put his truck in gear and continued toward Fargo slowly. He would report the pileup when he got to a place with phone coverage. But as he drove, doubt crept into his mind. Had he really seen vehicles? Or had the storm and the stress of sliding on black ice created a hallucination? He checked his mirrors. Behind him, the highway was empty. No pileup visible in the distance, no stopped vehicles, nothing but dark road and falling snow. Gregory pushed the incident from his mind and focused on reaching Fargo. The storm intensified. Snow fell so thick that his wipers barely kept his windshield clear. The temperature continued to drop. 30 below, 40 below. Temperatures that should not be possible even in North Dakota winter. More vehicles appeared ahead. Another pileup, this one larger, maybe 20 cars and trucks stopped in a cluster that blocked the entire highway. Gregory hit his brakes, began to slide, and once again the vehicles seemed to shift, creating a path for his truck to pass through. This time Gregory saw the people. They stood next to their vehicles, watching his truck slide past. They were dressed in winter clothing from different eras. A woman in a 1950s coat, a man in 80s style parka, a family in modern Gore-Tex. They all stood perfectly still, not reacting to the cold or the wind, just watching Gregory pass through their impossible gathering. And they were all frozen solid. Ice coated their clothes, their hair, their skin. They were statues of ice, preserved in the moment of their deaths, standing forever next to the vehicles they had been driving when black ice and North Dakota winter killed them. Gregory understood then. These were not actual vehicles blocking the road. These were echoes, impressions left in reality by people who had died on this stretch of highway, who had hit black ice and crashed or stopped and frozen. The road remembered them, and on nights when conditions were right, when the temperature dropped far enough and black ice formed again, they appeared, replaying their final moments. More pileups appeared as Gregory continued toward Fargo. Dozens of them, hundreds of vehicles, thousands of frozen people standing next to cars and trucks, their eyes following Gregory's Volvo as it slid past, the only moving vehicle on a highway populated entirely by the dead. Gregory tried to turn around to go back to Minneapolis, but the black ice extended in both directions now. He was trapped in a corridor of ice, sliding forward whether he wanted to or not, passing through an endless graveyard of vehicles and frozen drivers who had died on Highway 94 over decades of brutal North Dakota winters. The temperature gauge showed 60 below. Impossible. At that temperature, Gregory should be freezing too. But his heater worked, kept the cab warm, kept him alive while he slid past the dead. Then the black ice road began to change. The pavement beneath his wheels became older, rougher, transforming from modern highway to gravel road to dirt track. Gregory was sliding backward through time, experiencing Highway 94 as it had been in previous decades, watching the road itself age in reverse as he passed through its history. The vehicles around him changed too, becoming older models, vintage cars and trucks from the 50s, 40s, 30s. The frozen people wore clothing from those eras, standing next to vehicles that had crashed or stopped decades before Gregory was born. He was experiencing every fatal black ice incident that had ever occurred on this section of road. Every person who had died when invisible ice turned the highway into a death trap. They were all here, preserved in ice, replaying their final moments when conditions matched the night they died. Gregory's truck finally stopped sliding. He had reached the end of the black ice road, arriving at a place where the highway simply ended, where pavement gave way to snow-covered prairie that stretched to the horizon. This was Highway 94 before it was Highway 94. Before roads existed here at all, before humans carved paths through this brutal landscape. And standing at the end of the road was a figure, tall and thin, made entirely of ice, It was humanoid but not human, a winter spirit, the embodiment of black ice itself. It raised one crystalline hand and pointed back the way Gregory had come. Gregory understood. He had to drive back, had to return through the gauntlet of frozen dead, had to make it back to the present before he became one of them, before he joined the collection of ice statues standing next to their vehicles. He put his truck in reverse and began the journey back. The black ice road was still there, still impossibly slick, but now Gregory was sliding in reverse, passing the frozen people in the opposite direction, moving forward through time instead of backward. The decades passed quickly in reverse. Frozen people from the 30s faded, 40s, 50s, 60s. Gregory slid past them all, his truck moving backward but somehow staying on the road, guided by forces he did not understand. Finally, he reached the present. The black ice ended abruptly. His wheels found purchase on clear, dry pavement. The temperature gauge showed 15 below, normal for December in North Dakota. The storm had stopped. Stars were visible overhead. Gregory put his truck in drive and continued to Fargo. He arrived at his delivery location 2 hours late, his GPS showing massive route deviations that should not have been possible. The warehouse crew asked what happened. Gregory told them weather delays. They accepted this. But Gregory never drove Highway 94 in winter again. He took alternate routes, longer paths that avoided that section of North Dakota. Because he had seen what waited there when black ice formed, had seen the road's memory of every person it had killed, had met the winter spirit that ruled over that frozen corridor where the dead stood forever beside their vehicles. And sometimes when Gregory checks the weather reports and sees that temperatures in North Dakota are dropping below zero, when he hears about black ice forming on Highway 94, he thinks about all those frozen people standing in the dark, waiting for the next driver to slide past them, waiting to add one more statue to their eternal collection. He wonders if anyone else has experienced what he experienced, if other drivers have slid through time on the black ice road, if the winter spirit still stands at the end of the highway where pavement becomes prairie, pointing travelers back toward the present, giving them one chance to escape before the black ice claims them forever. Story 4. The Hitchhiker with No Shadow. Maria Rodriguez picked up the hitchhiker against her better judgment on Highway 101 in California. It was April of 2023 and she had been driving her International LT for 15 years without ever stopping for strangers. But this hitchhiker was different. The woman stood on the shoulder in bright sunlight, waving frantically, and something about her desperation made Maria pull over. The woman climbed into the passenger seat, out of breath and grateful. She was in her 30s, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, carrying no bags or supplies. "Thank you so much," she said. "I've been walking for hours. No one would stop." "Where are you headed?" Maria asked, pulling back onto the highway. "Santa Barbara," the woman said. "I need to get to Santa Barbara. It's important." Maria checked her route. She was hauling wine from Paso Robles to Los Angeles. Santa Barbara was on the way. She could drop the hitchhiker off without significant delay. "I'm Maria," she said. "Jessica," the hitchhiker replied. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Maria noticed something odd. Jessica sat perfectly still, not moving at all, not even the small unconscious movements everyone makes. And despite the bright California sunshine streaming through the windows, Jessica cast no shadow. Maria blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light. But no, the passenger seat remained uniformly lit, no dark shape where Jessica's body should have blocked the sun. Maria's own shadow was clear on the seat, but Jessica had none. "Are you okay?" Maria asked carefully. "I'm fine," Jessica said. Her voice was pleasant but flat, lacking the natural variation of human speech. "Why do you ask?" Maria did not mention the missing shadow. Instead, she tried to make conversation. What takes you to Santa Barbara? I need to see someone, Jessica said. Someone who's been waiting for me. I'm very late. I should have been there hours ago. Hours ago from where? Jessica did not answer. She stared straight ahead at the highway, unblinking, unnaturally still. Maria felt uncomfortable. Something was very wrong with her passenger. She considered pulling over, asking Jessica to get out, but they were on the highway with no convenient exits. Maria decided to drop her off at Santa Barbara as quickly as possible and never pick up hitchhikers again. The miles passed. Jessica remained motionless and silent. Maria tried the radio to fill the awkward quiet. As soon as the music started, Jessica spoke. I died on this highway, she said. Her voice had not changed, still pleasant and flat, but the words made Maria's blood freeze. 4 hours ago, car accident at mile marker 312. I was thrown from my vehicle. I died instantly. Maria gripped the steering wheel. That's not funny. I'm not joking, Jessica said. I'm dead, but I need to get to Santa Barbara before my body does. There's someone waiting for me there, someone I need to tell something important, and I can't tell them if I'm just a corpse in an ambulance. Maria looked at her passenger, really looked. Jessica's skin had no color variation, no blemishes, no pores. Her hair did not move in the air conditioning breeze, and still no shadow, no proof that she occupied physical space. You're not real, Maria whispered. I'm real enough to need a ride, Jessica said. I'm real enough to have unfinished business. I'm real enough to be sitting in your truck right now. Will you take me to Santa Barbara or not? Maria did not know what to say. Every rational part of her mind insisted this was impossible, that dead people did not hitchhike, that Jessica must be alive and playing some kind of sick prank. But she could not explain the missing shadow, could not explain the unnatural stillness, could not explain the certainty in her gut that Jessica was telling the truth. I'll take you to Santa Barbara, Maria finally said. Thank you, Jessica replied. They drove in silence again. Maria checked the CB radio, her phone, anything that might connect her to the outside world, to reality, to confirmation that she was not hallucinating. But everything worked normally. She was just driving down Highway 101 with a dead woman in her passenger seat. Can I ask what you need to tell them? Maria asked. The person in Santa Barbara? I need to say goodbye, Jessica said. I need to tell them I love them. I need to make sure they know it wasn't their fault. We had a fight this morning. I left angry. I was driving too fast, not paying attention. The accident was my fault, not theirs. But if I don't tell them that, they'll blame themselves forever. Maria felt tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Jessica said. Just get me there before the ambulance. That's all I ask. Maria pushed her speed to 75, the fastest she dared with a loaded trailer. Santa Barbara was an hour away. Jessica said the accident was 4 hours ago. Plenty of time if the ambulance had to deal with investigation, paperwork, delays. But as they drove, Jessica began to change. Her form flickered, becoming translucent. Her voice, when she spoke, sounded distant. We need to hurry, she said. I'm fading. The connection is breaking. Once my body reaches Santa Barbara, I won't be able to maintain this form anymore. Maria pushed harder, hitting 80. Her truck shuddered with the speed, the load of wine shifting slightly in the trailer. She did not care. She had to get Jessica to Santa Barbara, had to help her complete this final task. They reached Santa Barbara's city limits. Jessica directed Maria to a residential neighborhood, to a small house with a neat yard. An ambulance was parked in the driveway. I'm too late, Jessica said, and her voice was barely audible now. She was almost completely transparent, just an outline of a person sitting in the passenger seat. No, Maria said, you made it. You're here. Go tell them. Jessica looked at Maria, and for the first time her face showed emotion. Gratitude, relief. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for helping me." The passenger door opened by itself. Jessica's form drifted out, a translucent ghost barely visible in the daylight. Maria watched through her windshield as Jessica floated up the driveway toward the house. A man stood on the porch crying, talking to paramedics. Jessica approached him, reached out a hand, and touched his shoulder. The man stopped crying, looked around, did not see Jessica but seemed to sense something, seemed to receive a message that words could not convey. He wiped his eyes, nodded to himself, and went back inside the house. His posture changed, his burden somehow lighter. Jessica faded completely, disappearing into the Santa Barbara sunshine. Maria sat in her truck for a long time, trying to process what she had witnessed. Finally, she pulled away from the house and continued to Los Angeles. Maria delivered her load of wine. She filed her logbooks. She reported no delays, no issues, nothing unusual. But she knew what she had done. She had given a dead woman a ride home, had helped her complete one final task, had been the means by which Jessica could say goodbye. And Maria Rodriguez, 15-year veteran of long-haul trucking, changed her policy that day. She started picking up hitchhikers again. Not all of them, but some of them, the ones who cast no shadows, the ones who sat too still, the ones who needed rides to places they could not reach on their own. She has given dozens of rides since then. Most of her passengers are ordinary people, alive and grateful for help. But some are like Jessica, transparent and fading, desperate to complete final business before they disappear entirely. Maria helps them all. She takes them where they need to go, no questions asked beyond the destination. Other truckers have heard rumors about Maria Rodriguez, about the woman who picks up hitchhikers that others cannot see, who makes unexplained detours to residential neighborhoods where she drops off passengers who cast no shadows. Some think she is crazy. Some think she is making it up. But other drivers, the ones who have seen things on the road that cannot be explained, who have encountered phenomena that physics and reason cannot account for, those drivers understand. The road is full of ghosts, full of people who died with unfinished business, full of spirits trying desperately to complete one final task. And most drivers pass them by. Cannot see them, cannot help them. But Maria Rodriguez can. She picks them up, gives them rides, helps them reach their destinations before they fade completely. And if you ever find yourself driving Highway 101 in California, and you see a hitchhiker standing in bright sunlight without casting a shadow, flag down Maria Rodriguez if you can. Because she is the only driver who will stop, the only one who will help, the only one who understands that sometimes the most important cargo you can haul is not wine or produce or manufactured goods, but rather the desperate souls of the recently dead, trying to make it home one last time to say goodbye. Story 5. The Endless Tunnel. Derek Thompson entered the tunnel on Interstate 70 in Colorado at 2 in the afternoon and did not emerge for 16 hours. He had been driving his Mack Anthem for 12 years and had passed through the Eisenhower Tunnel hundreds of times. The tunnel was 1.7 miles long, taking about 3 minutes to traverse at normal speeds. But on this day in July of 2023, the tunnel never ended. Derek entered from the east side, following a line of traffic into the mountain. The tunnel was bright, well lit, the ceiling visible above. Traffic moved at 50 miles per hour, normal for the conditions. Derek settled in behind a minivan, maintaining his distance, expecting to see daylight ahead in a couple of minutes. But the curve that led to the exit never came. The tunnel continued straight, stretching endlessly ahead. Derek checked his odometer. 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles. Still in the tunnel, still surrounded by concrete walls, still following the minivan that seemed as trapped as he was. Derek grabbed his CB radio. This is Thunder Road to any drivers in Eisenhower Tunnel. Anyone else feeling like this tunnel is longer than normal? Several voices responded immediately, all of them confused and frightened. I've been in here for an hour. Where's the exit? My GPS says I should be through by now, but I'm still in the tunnel. Something's wrong. This is impossible. Derek looked at his GPS. It showed him in the tunnel, his blue dot moving forward, but the tunnel on the map was normal length. According to the GPS, he should have exited 15 miles ago. But the reality around him was solid concrete, harsh fluorescent lighting, and an endless straight path through the mountain. He tried his phone. No signal, which was expected in a tunnel. But this tunnel was too long now for normal coverage to explain the lack of signal. Derek had the feeling that even if he was outside, his phone would not work. This tunnel existed in a space where normal communications could not reach. The traffic ahead began to slow. Derek could see brake lights activating in a chain reaction. The minivan in front of him stopped completely. Derek stopped behind it. The tunnel was now filled with stopped vehicles, a traffic jam in an impossible space. Derek climbed down from his cab. Other drivers were doing the same, leaving their vehicles, looking around in confusion and fear. The tunnel stretched endlessly in both directions, no curves, no exits, just straight concrete walls disappearing into infinity. A man approached Derek, his face pale. I entered this tunnel 3 hours ago, the man said. I've been driving at 50 miles an hour for 3 hours. I should be 2 states away by now, but I'm still here, still in this tunnel. More drivers gathered, sharing their stories. All of them had entered Eisenhower Tunnel at different times, some recently, some hours ago. But they were all trapped now, all caught in a tunnel that had somehow expanded to infinite length, swallowing vehicles and refusing to release them. Derek walked to the tunnel wall and touched it. Solid concrete, cool and real. He walked to the other side. Same thing. The tunnel was real, but it was wrong, stretched beyond possibility, existing in a space that normal geography could not contain. Time passed strangely. Derek's watch showed hours going by, but he felt no hunger, no thirst, no need to use the bathroom. The other drivers reported the same thing. They existed in a state of suspension, maintained by the tunnel itself, kept alive but not living, trapped but not dead. Some drivers tried to escape by walking. They left their vehicles and headed back the way they had come, trying to reach the entrance. But they never made progress. The tunnel behind them stretched as endlessly as the tunnel ahead. Walking for hours brought them no closer to the entrance, as if they were on a treadmill, moving but going nowhere. Derek tried driving forward. He climbed back in his Mac and accelerated, weaving between stopped vehicles, racing down the open lane, trying to outrun the tunnel's expansion. His speedometer hit 70, 80, 90. The tunnel blurred past. But there was no exit, no change, no end, just endless concrete and fluorescent lights. He drove for what felt like hours before giving up and returning to where he had started. Somehow, despite driving at high speed for so long, he found his way back to the exact spot where he had stopped initially. The tunnel had looped, brought him back, refused to let him escape through speed. The other drivers were getting desperate. Some were crying, some were praying, some were trying to break through the concrete walls with tire irons and jack handles, accomplishing nothing except damaging their tools against solid rock. Derek sat on the hood of his Mac and tried to think. There had to be logic to this. Tunnels did not just expand infinitely. Reality did not work that way. Unless this was not normal reality. Unless entering the tunnel had somehow transported them to another place, another dimension where tunnels did not end and traffic could be trapped forever. He noticed something. The tunnel lights were arranged in regular intervals, each light fixture identical to the next. But if Derek focused on a specific light and walked toward it, the light never got closer. The interval between him and the light remained constant, as if space itself was stretching to maintain the distance. Understanding dawned. They were not trapped in a long tunnel. They were trapped in a single moment of the tunnel, a 3-minute stretch that was repeating infinitely, folding space in on itself. Every time they thought they were moving forward, they were actually returning to the beginning, experiencing the same section of tunnel over and over while believing they were making progress. Derek shared his theory with the other drivers. Most did not believe him. Some got angry, accused him of giving up, of accepting the impossible. But a few understood, saw the logic in his explanation. "If we're in a loop," one woman said, "how do we break it?" Derek did not know, but he thought about tunnels, about their purpose. Tunnels connect 2 points, allow passage through obstacles. Maybe the key was not to move forward through the tunnel, but to move perpendicular to it, to somehow break out of the loop by changing direction entirely. He gathered the drivers who believed him, about 20 people out of the hundreds trapped in the tunnel. Derek explained his plan. They would form a group, link hands, and together they would push against the tunnel wall, not trying to break through the concrete, but trying to break through the loop itself to will themselves out of the repeating moment. It sounded insane. Most of the drivers refused to participate, but Derek and his 20 believers tried anyway. They linked hands, pressed against the concrete wall, and focused on the idea of escape, of breaking the loop, of returning to normal reality. At first, nothing happened. Then the concrete began to feel soft, malleable, as if it was not solid rock, but rather a projection, a hologram of a tunnel wall. Derek pushed harder. His hand sank into the concrete, then his arm, then his whole body. He fell through the wall and landed on pavement. Real pavement outside the tunnel on the west side of the Eisenhower Tunnel. His Mac sat on the shoulder where he had apparently stopped. The tunnel entrance was behind him. Traffic flowed normally through it, vehicles entering and exiting at the expected 3-minute intervals. Derek checked his watch. Only 4 minutes had passed since he entered the tunnel. 4 minutes, not 16 hours. Time had not passed normally in the loop. Or maybe time inside the loop was different from time outside. The other drivers who had pushed through the wall with Derek appeared around him, stumbling onto the shoulder, emerging from nothing, looking confused and grateful. Their vehicles also materialized on the shoulder, exactly where they should have been if they had simply pulled over after exiting the tunnel. But the drivers who had not pushed through, who had not believed Derek's theory, they did not appear. They were still in the loop, still trapped, still believing they were in an endless tunnel. Derek called authorities, tried to explain what happened. They did not believe him. The tunnel was fine, they said. Traffic was flowing, normally. No vehicles were missing. No drivers were reported trapped. Derek's story was dismissed as fatigue, as hallucination, as stress. But Derek knows the truth. Somewhere in a fold of space, in a loop that repeats infinitely, hundreds of drivers are still trapped in Eisenhower Tunnel, still trying to find the exit that will never come. And sometimes when Derek drives through that tunnel now, he feels it trying to catch him again, feels reality start to stretch and loop, feels the concrete walls preparing to trap him in that endless moment. He drives through quickly now, never stopping, never slowing down more than absolutely necessary. He watches his odometer carefully, confirming that he exits after the expected distance. And he tries not to think about the drivers he left behind, the ones who did not believe him, who are still in that impossible tunnel, still waiting for an exit that exists only if you believe strongly enough to break through the walls of reality itself. Story 6. The Cargo That Whispered. Angela Foster had been hauling for Great Plains Logistics for 22 years when she picked up the whispering cargo in Omaha. It was September of 2022, and her manifest listed the load as archived documents destined for a facility in Denver. The cargo was loaded into her Peterbilt 389 in sealed crates, 40 of them, each about 3 feet square. The whispering started an hour outside of Omaha. Angela first noticed it when she turned off her radio to concentrate on merging onto Interstate 80. In the silence, she heard voices, dozens of them coming from her trailer. They were whispering, too quiet to make out individual words, but definitely human voices, definitely speaking. Angela checked her mirrors. The trailer was sealed, exactly as the loading crew had secured it. No way for anyone to be inside. She grabbed her CB radio and called back to the Omaha facility. "This is Falcon to Omaha Dispatch. I need to verify my cargo. Manifest says archived documents, but I'm hearing sounds from the trailer. Could someone have been sealed inside by accident?" The dispatcher sounded confused. "Negative, Falcon. Your cargo was loaded by certified crew. Impossible for anyone to be in there, probably just cargo shifting." "Cargo doesn't whisper," Angela said. "What?" "Nothing. Falcon out." Angela pulled off at the next rest area and walked back to her trailer. She pressed her ear against the metal door. The whispering was clear now. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once, creating a sound like wind through leaves, but distinctly human. She could almost make out words, almost understand what they were saying. She broke the seal against company policy and opened the trailer doors. The crates sat exactly as they had been loaded, strapped down securely. Angela climbed into the trailer and approached the nearest crate. The whispering grew louder. She put her ear against the wooden slats. The whispers came from inside the crate, not from a person trapped inside, but from the documents themselves. The archived papers were whispering, their words somehow given voice, creating an audible manifestation of whatever was written on them. Angela pried open a crate, breaking the seal. Inside were thousands of documents, yellowed with age, covered in handwriting. She picked up one at random and tried to read it. The handwriting was elegant but old-fashioned, difficult to decipher. As she held the page, she heard a whisper, loud and clear. "I regret leaving her. I regret every day I stayed away. If I could go back, I would choose differently." Angela dropped the page. The whisper stopped. She picked up another page. Another whisper, different voice. "The money is hidden beneath the oak tree. No one will find it there. My family will search, but they will never know." Angela understood. These were not ordinary documents. These were confessions, regrets, secrets, things people had written down and hidden away, things that were never meant to be shared. Somehow the emotional weight of those secrets had given them voice, turned them into whispers that echoed from the pages. She closed the crate and sealed her trailer again. The whispering continued, muffled now, but persistent. Angela climbed back into her Peterbilt and continued toward Denver, trying to ignore the voices, trying to focus on the road. But the whispers grew louder. As night fell, they became impossible to ignore. Angela heard confessions of crimes, admissions of love, expressions of hate, regrets about children and spouses, and decisions made decades ago. The whispers overlapped, creating a chaotic cacophony that filled her cab, that made concentration nearly impossible. Angela turned her radio up to maximum volume, trying to drown out the whispers. It did not work. The voices seemed to bypass her ears entirely, speaking directly into her mind, impossible to block or ignore. She pulled off at a truck stop near North Platte, Nebraska, desperate for silence. But even with her truck parked and her engine off, the whispers continued. They followed her into the truck stop diner, the convenience store, the bathroom. The archived documents had somehow infected her, marked her as a listener, ensured that she would hear their secrets whether she wanted to or not. Other people in the truck stop could not hear the whispers. Angela tried asking other drivers if they heard anything unusual. They looked at her strangely. The whispers were for her alone, a burden placed on the person transporting the documents, a curse that came with handling secrets that were meant to stay buried. Angela returned to her truck and drove through the night. The whispers told her things she did not want to know. Murders that were never solved, affairs that destroyed families, betrayals that ruined lives. Every dark secret that had been written down and archived was now being whispered into Angela's consciousness, filling her mind with the shadows of other people's lives. By the time she reached Denver, Angela had not slept in 36 hours. The whispers had prevented any rest, their constant voices making silence impossible. She drove to the delivery facility, a nondescript warehouse in an industrial district. The facility was staffed by people who wore noise-canceling headphones. They unloaded her trailer quickly and efficiently, never speaking, never acknowledging the whispers that Angela could still hear, even though the crates were no longer in her trailer. A supervisor approached Angela, clipboard in hand. He removed one side of his headphones. "First time hauling whispering cargo?" he asked. Angela nodded, too exhausted to speak. "It'll stop in a few days," the supervisor said. "Once the documents are properly stored, the voices will fade. Most drivers report the whispers disappearing within 72 hours of delivery." "Most drivers?" Angela managed to ask. "Some people are more sensitive than others," the supervisor said. "Some continue to hear the whispers forever. They become listeners, people who can hear the secrets that others have buried. It's a burden, but it can also be a gift. The whispers tell truths that need to be heard." "I don't want to hear them," Angela said. "None of us do," the supervisor replied. "But someone has to transport these archives and someone has to bear the weight of the secrets they contain. You were chosen for this route because you have the strength to handle it." Angela left Denver without another word. The supervisor was right. The whispers did fade over the next few days, growing quieter, less insistent. But they never stopped completely. Even now, years later, Angela still hears them occasionally, whispers of secrets that filter through from some archive or another, reminders of the cargo she hauled that one September. She learned to live with it, learned to distinguish between the whispers and her own thoughts, learned to ignore the confessions and regrets that still echo in quiet moments. But Angela Foster was changed by that delivery, marked by the experience of hearing thousands of secrets whispered all at once. And sometimes, when she picks up a new load, she wonders if it will whisper too, if she has become sensitive to all secrets now, if every piece of cargo she hauls might carry voices that only she can hear. The fear makes her check her manifests carefully, makes her ask questions about her cargo that most drivers would never think to ask, makes her cautious in ways that go beyond normal road safety. Because once you hear the whispers, once you become a listener, you can never fully return to the silence you once knew. The secrets are always there, always waiting, always ready to be heard by those who have the misfortune or the gift or the curse to transport them from one archive to another. See it, carrying the weight of other people's regrets across miles of highway, under skies that cannot absolve them. Story 7. The Wrong Year. Kevin Park left Kansas City on June 15, 2023 and arrived in St. Louis on June 15, 2013. He had been driving his International ProStar for 9 years when the temporal displacement occurred, and he did not notice anything was wrong until he tried to make his delivery. The drive from Kansas City to St. Louis on Interstate 70 was routine. Kevin had made this run hundreds of times. 4 hours of highway, mostly straight, passing through small Missouri towns. He left at 6 in the morning, stopped once for fuel, and arrived in St. Louis just before 10. The delivery facility was where it should have been, but it looked different. Older, less maintained, with signage that Kevin did not remember. He backed his truck up to the loading dock and climbed down with his paperwork. The warehouse manager looked at Kevin's manifest with confusion. "What company did you say you're with?" "Interstate Freight Solutions," Kevin said. "Never heard of them," the manager replied, "and this delivery isn't on my schedule. I'm not expecting any trucks today." Kevin checked his paperwork again. Everything was correct. Delivery address, date, time, cargo specifications. "I'm definitely at the right place. 237 Industrial Boulevard, correct?" "That's here," the manager said. "But something's wrong with your paperwork. The date on this manifest is June 15th, 2023. That's 10 years in the future." Kevin laughed. "What?" "No, today is June 15th, 2023. The manager pulled out his phone and showed Kevin the date. June 15th, 2013. Kevin stared at the phone, his mind refusing to accept what he was seeing. This had to be a joke, a prank, some kind of elaborate setup. But the warehouse manager looked genuinely confused, not like someone playing along with a gag. Kevin checked his own phone. The date read June 15th, 2023, different from the manager's phone by exactly 10 years. Kevin's phone showed his usual apps, his usual contacts, photos from the previous week. Everything was as it should be, except the rest of the world disagreed about what year it was. "I need to make a call," Kevin said, stepping outside. He called his dispatcher. The call went straight to a recording. "The number you have dialed is not in service." Kevin tried again. Same result. He tried calling his wife. Same thing. Number not in service. Kevin walked back to his truck, his mind racing. He checked his GPS. It showed the current date as June 15th, 2023. He checked the radio. A news broadcast was discussing events from 2013, the Boston Marathon bombing, political developments that Kevin remembered from a decade ago. He had somehow driven from 2023 to 2013. The highway had not just transported him across distance, but across time as well, depositing him in a year where his company did not exist yet, where his phone numbers were not assigned yet, where he was driving a truck that technically should not be manufactured for several more years. Kevin considered his options. He could try to explain to authorities what had happened, but who would believe him? He could try to drive back to Kansas City, hoping the highway would reverse the temporal displacement, but he had no guarantee that would work. Instead, Kevin decided to learn more about where, or rather when, he was. He drove around St. Louis, looking at the city as it had been 10 years earlier. The skyline was slightly different. Some buildings were missing. Others that he remembered being torn down were still standing. The technology was older. The cars on the road were older models. The people's clothing styles were dated. Everything confirmed it. Kevin Park was in 2013, displaced in time by a journey along Interstate 70. Night fell. Kevin parked his truck at a rest area and tried to think logically about his situation. If driving from Kansas City to St. Louis had moved him backward 10 years, maybe driving from St. Louis back to Kansas City would move him forward 10 years, returning him to his proper time. It was the only plan he had. Kevin drove back toward Kansas City on Interstate 70, retracing his route, watching the mile markers carefully, trying to identify the exact point where the temporal displacement had occurred. The highway looked normal. No strange phenomena. No glowing lights, no obvious signs that reality was bending around him. Just ordinary road, ordinary traffic, ordinary Missouri landscape in the summer of 2013. Kevin reached Kansas City and checked the date. Still 2013. The return trip had not restored him to his proper time. He was stuck, 10 years in his own past, driving a truck that should not exist, holding a manifest for a delivery that would not be scheduled for another decade. He parked his truck at a truck stop and spent 3 days trying to figure out what to do. He could not contact his family, his company, anyone from his life in 2023. He could not make his delivery because the facility would not accept cargo from the future. He could not even explain his situation without sounding insane. Kevin decided to adapt. He sold his truck, claiming it was a custom build, and used the money to survive. He found work at a warehouse, a job that did not require explaining where he came from or how he had gotten there. He rented a small apartment and tried to build a life in the wrong year. But Kevin never forgot that he was displaced. He watched the years pass. 2013 becoming 14, becoming 15. He lived through events he had already experienced once before, seeing news stories he remembered, watching the world progress toward the year he had left. And on June 15th, 2023, Kevin returned to the Kansas City truck stop, where he had sold his International Pro Star 10 years earlier. He wanted to see if his younger self would appear, if the Kevin Park of 2023 would drive his route to St. Louis and experience the same temporal displacement. Kevin waited all day. Many trucks came and went, but none of them were his old International Pro Star. None of them were driven by a younger version of himself. The temporal displacement had not repeated. Kevin had experienced something unique, something that had happened to him alone. He still lives in the present now, having caught up to his proper time the long way, by living through each intervening year. Kevin Park is 52 years old, but he has experienced 62 years of life, having lived through the decade from 2013 to 2023 twice. Once going forward and once after being displaced backward. He never drove a truck professionally again. Could not risk another temporal displacement, another journey that might trap him in the wrong year. But Kevin still wonders what caused his displacement, what force or phenomenon on Interstate 70 between Kansas City and St. Louis bent time enough to throw him a decade into his own past. And he wonders if it has happened to others, if there are other drivers stuck in wrong years, living through decades they have already experienced, waiting patiently to catch up to their proper times, moving forward one day at a time because the highway decided to move them backward 10 years in a single 4-hour drive. Story 8. The Weeping Trailer. Harold Bennett noticed the moisture the second day into his haul from Portland to Miami. He had been driving his Freightliner Cascadia for 33 years, and water damage was a serious concern for any cargo. But this moisture was different. It was not condensation or rain damage. The trailer was weeping, producing liquid from its walls themselves, crying like a living thing in distress. Harold had picked up the load on November 3, 2022. The manifest listed industrial materials, which was vague enough to make Harold suspicious, but the paperwork was legitimate and the pay was excellent. The cargo was in sealed containers, stacked and strapped securely. Everything seemed normal when Harold began the cross-country drive. But somewhere around Boise, Idaho, Harold noticed the first drops. Water was seeping through the trailer walls, not from any obvious source, just appearing on the metal surface and running down in thin streams. By the time Harold reached Salt Lake City, the weeping had increased. The entire interior of the trailer was wet, water flowing from every surface, pooling on the floor. Harold stopped to inspect the cargo. The sealed containers showed no damage. They were dry, undisturbed, exactly as they had been loaded. But the trailer itself was producing water, generating moisture from the metal walls as if the truck itself was crying. Harold called his dispatcher. "I've got a problem with my trailer. Water damage extensive. I need to stop and have it inspected." "Negative," the dispatcher replied. "That cargo is time sensitive. You need to maintain schedule. Whatever the issue is, deal with it after delivery." "The trailer is weeping," Harold said. "I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you, the walls are producing water. This isn't normal wear and tear." "Maintain schedule," the dispatcher repeated. Deliver the cargo, then we'll have the trailer inspected. Harold did not like it, but orders were orders. He continued south, watching in his mirrors as water began leaking from the trailer seams, running down the exterior in streams that left dark trails on the white metal. By Oklahoma, the weeping had intensified. Water poured from the trailer in steady streams, enough that other drivers on the highway gave Harold's truck a wide berth, confused by the water spilling from a sealed trailer in weather that was dry and clear. Harold pulled off at a truck stop to investigate further. He opened the trailer doors and found the interior completely soaked. Water ran down the walls, dripped from the ceiling, covered every surface, but the cargo containers remained dry as if they were repelling the moisture, as if the water was specifically avoiding them. Harold climbed into the trailer and pressed his ear against one of the walls. He heard something beneath the sound of flowing water. Sobbing. Someone was crying, their sobs muffled and distant, coming from inside the trailer walls themselves. Harold pressed harder against the metal, trying to understand what he was hearing. The sobbing grew louder, more distinct. It was not one person crying. It was many people, dozens maybe, all sobbing simultaneously, their tears manifesting as the water that wept from the trailer walls. "Who are you?" Harold asked, speaking to the weeping trailer. "Why are you crying?" The sobbing stopped momentarily. Then a voice, distorted and echoing, emerged from the metal. "We are the cargo. We are what you're hauling. We are weeping because we know where we're going. We know what waits for us in Miami, and we are terrified." Harold backed away from the wall. "The cargo is industrial materials, containers, not people." "Look closer," the voice said. "Look at what you're really hauling." Harold approached the nearest container and examined it carefully. The seal was intact, but there was a small window like a porthole covered by a metal plate. Harold pried the plate open and looked inside. The container was full of ashes. Human ashes. Not remains in urns, but loose ash, piled deep. The cremated remains of hundreds of people mixed together into an anonymous mass. Harold checked the other containers. All of them contained ashes. Thousands of people reduced to ash, all being transported to Miami for purposes Harold could not guess and did not want to know. The weeping intensified. Water poured from the trailer walls in torrents now, flooding the truck stop parking lot, creating a small lake around Harold's truck. Other drivers evacuated their vehicles, confused and frightened by the impossible amount of water coming from a single sealed trailer. Harold climbed back into his cab and grabbed his CB radio. "This is old-timer to any driver who can hear me. I need help. My cargo is wrong. I need to know what I'm really hauling." A voice answered, old and tired. "You're hauling the forgotten, old-timer. You're hauling people who died without anyone to claim their remains. People whose ashes were stored in facilities waiting for families that never came. Someone bought those ashes, bought thousands of them, and is transporting them to Miami for reasons that are better left unknown." "Why is my trailer weeping?" Harold asked. "Because the dead can weep when they're frightened," the voice said. "Because they know their final destination, and it terrifies them. Because they want someone to know, someone to bear witness, someone to remember that they existed before they're used for whatever purpose awaits them in Miami." Harold understood. The weeping was a plea. The dead were crying out through the only medium they could control, manifesting their tears as physical water, trying to make their distress visible, trying to find someone who would acknowledge them. Harold made a decision. He would not deliver this cargo. Whatever waited in Miami, whatever purpose these ashes were meant to serve, he would not participate. He would find a proper burial for these forgotten dead, would give them the dignity they had been denied in life and death. He drove his weeping trailer to a small cemetery in Arkansas. He explained the situation to the cemetery director, showed them the containers full of ashes, told them about the weeping walls. The director listened, believed him, and agreed to help. They buried the ashes in a mass grave, a respectful resting place for people whose names were lost, but whose remains deserved to be laid to rest. Harold paid for the burial himself, thousands of dollars from his savings, money he could not afford to spend but felt compelled to give. As the last ashes were buried, the weeping stopped. The trailer dried instantly, the water disappearing as if it had never existed. The metal walls were pristine again, no sign of the tears that had poured from them for days. Harold called his dispatcher to report the situation. He was fired immediately, told he had violated his contract, had failed to deliver time-sensitive cargo. Harold accepted this. Some things were more important than keeping a job. He never hauled freight again. The incident had changed him, shown him that cargo was not always what manifests claimed, that sometimes what you transported had consciousness, had feelings, had the ability to weep when facing a fate worse than death. Harold Bennett is 70 years old now, retired, living on his pension. But he visits that cemetery in Arkansas every year, brings flowers for the mass grave, remembers the forgotten dead whose tears he carried across America in a weeping trailer. He is the only person who knows where they're buried, the only witness to their final journey, the only one who heard their sobbing and chose to listen, to help, to give them peace instead of delivering them to whatever purpose awaited in Miami. And sometimes, late at night, Harold thinks he can still hear the sobbing faint and distant, not from his old trailer, but from other trailers on highways across America. Other cargo that weeps, other forgotten dead being transported to unknown fates, crying out for someone to hear them, to acknowledge them, to remember that they were once people who lived and loved and deserved better than to be reduced to anonymous ash and shipped like industrial material to destinations that wait in darkness.